on the agenda, got a little finance presentation this evening. I'm run it over here right now. Just do it. It's kind of a presentation that we gave to the community, but I've obviously updated it for another year's worth of information, and then I've added some other things that we've been dealing with lately. So the purpose is to just give you a quick history of the revenue expenditures, where we've lost revenue, what we've done to balance our budget, compared to the other districts, and like I said, there's some other interesting things at the end, and then if anybody has any questions. The first item is, since 2008, FY stands for fiscal year. It's a 12-month period beginning July 1st and ending June 30th. So our fiscal year 2008 starts July 1st, 2007, and ends June 30th, 2008. So since 2008, you can see how, for the most part, our revenue has steadily declined, and then a year or two later, our expenses started declining. And that's mostly due to the cuts at the state level. And there's the graph that shows, since 2007, what our cuts at the state level have been. The highest amount we received in a year was in 2008 at $14.4 million, and this year we're estimating $13.350,000. So that's $1.1 million per year that we had to, just through state funding, that we had to adjust our budget. One of the areas where the state cut us and the district attempted to plan was personal property tax reimbursement. Personal property is tables and chairs and refrigerators that businesses have, cars on a car lot. A number of years ago, the state eliminated the personal property tax and replaced it with a commercial activity tax. And they also said they were going to reimburse districts for that lost revenue. On the blue line was the planned reimbursement schedule. And then in 2010, they said, you know what, never mind that schedule. We're gonna, if you don't meet certain thresholds, we're just gonna phase you out over 2 years. So while the district attempted to plan for a phase out, it came even quicker than anticipated. Because we always get, why didn't you plan? Well, we should still be receiving money for 3 more years, and it was done 3 years ago. So let's talk about the last money we've gotten for operations. The Joint Financing District, which was renewed this year, is a tax levy that taxes the cumulative or combined values of Painesville City, the Riverside School District, Perry, and Madison. It was originally approved at 4.9 mils. It's now collecting at 2.49. It can only collect a certain dollar amount, and as the values in the member districts grow, the millage has to go down. Therefore, it will not collect any more than it originally did. That was 25 years ago. That's the last operating levy this district has passed. That was 25 years ago. The last levy that this district passed, only for the benefit of this district, was in 1989. Are you guys even alive then? Passed at 4.9 mils, now collecting at 1.93, and that was 26 years ago. What kind of problems do these types of levies cause in a district like ours? The emergency levy generates $697,000. And back in 1989, you could buy $697,000 worth of goods. In 2014, it takes a little over $1.3 million based on inflation to buy the same goods or services. But as I said, as valuation grows, millage goes down, we collect the same amount year after year. So as inflation affects our budget and our revenue stays flat, we have to cut the difference. And that's what we've done. Just briefly, the different types of levies we have. Continuing levies are those that were passed 1996 and prior. We have the one emergency levy, which is a 5-year term, fixed dollar amount, millage goes down as values go up. Doesn't generate any more this year than it did 25 years ago. And then the joint financing district. That's for the operations of the district. We have a permanent improvement levy, which we buy buses, bus parts, and do capital improvements. And we had 2 bond issues, debt service 1992, which dropped off actually last year, and the one that came on in 2013, which was actually approved in 2010. When the voters approved it in 2010, the deal was that it didn't hit your tax bills until 2013. So, what have we done to balance our budget in the last 5 or 6 years? First and foremost, staff cuts. Our largest single expense that we have in this district are salaries, because we are a people business. We deliver instruction from person to person, teacher to student. So over the last 6 years, we've put 46.5 people. Teachers. Non-teachers, 37.5. That brings our total to 84. For example, this year we had retirements and other people leave. We did not replace 2.5 of those people. So we cut 84 staff members. We haven't given any base salary increases in 4 of the last 6 years. One of those years it was 0.5% midway through the year, and the other year it was 1.3%. So our base salary increase has not kept up with inflation. Our employee contributions have increased. For a couple years they stayed the same because the cost to the district stayed the same. But last year when we gave the employees an increase, or this year when we gave them an increase in their salary, we also increased the health insurance contributions. But we have been able to keep our insurance costs lower than the industry-wide costs. How have we been able to do that? We are one of the 11 members of the Lake County Schools Healthcare Consortium, where 8 Lake County districts, 1 in Cuyahoga County, the Educational Service Center, and Lakeland Community College grouped together to purchase our insurance, hospitalization, prescription, life, dental, and vision. And that allows us, with as big as we are, to get favorable rates. And we also are self-insured. So if we don't pay a profit on every contract that Medical Mutual holds with us. We have other consortiums that we are members of. The Ohio School Council, which is 160 or 196 members. We group purchase natural gas, which really worked out well. Last year, our natural gas, we pay a flat amount, and this year it went down from $15,000 a month to $9,700 a month, because as a group we're able to purchase gas so much cheaper. Power for schools, we have special rates with First Energy. We also have a little pull with them when they attempt to throw some other types of charges in. For example, the cold winter, I think as homeowners we all paid an additional charge. As a school district we were able to fight that and not have to pay it. We purchase our buses through the Ohio School Council, and we purchase supplies through the Ohio School Council. When you have 196 schools grouping together, the purchasing power you have is good. Ohio Cooperative Purchasing, which are all statewide agencies, can participate in this program. They bid out contracts on behalf of all the public entities. Our copy machines, are through the state purchasing, state pricing. They're cheaper now than they were 5 years ago. And then we are members of the Ohio School Board Association, which Mr. Fabian will be at the business meeting, and we're in a group rating program for workers' compensation. You have a bad year as an individual district, it doesn't affect you as much as if you had a bad year if you were on your own. So what has that done to our budget? Our expenses this year are $2.3 million lower than 2008. So we've knocked $2.3 million out of our budget on every year. Each year it's 2.3 less. This is where we thought we'd be back in 2012. This is based on the 5-year forecast that we had in place, and this will show you the effects of those budget cuts. In 2016, we thought our expense, 2016, by the way, is the year that we're in now, we thought our expenses would be about $28,750,000. They're a little over $25 million. It's just because we have cut those 84 people and done other budget adjustments that we aren't spending that. And the reason we're not spending is because we're not getting it in. So our expenses every year are slightly less than our revenue, but at least that way, every year we cut for inflation. As our budget is affected by inflation by 3%, we have to cut 3% out of our budget. Without an increase in revenue, that's the only way to balance a budget. We thought at the end of this year would be a little over $10 million in the hole. Now, that's not going to happen because we have to have a balanced budget. So in 2012, 2011, 2012, we started the cuts, and we're actually anticipating ending this year with a little over, right around $1 million. The fund balance is a little less than that, but that's a discussion for another day. But that was the good news. The bad news is, again, as inflation impacts our budget, our ending balance is going to continue to go down. So we have to continue to look at our budget annually, or what we've done is look at it every 2 years, and see if there's any possibility for additional revenue. If there's not, as we discussed, the only other way to balance it is to make cuts.
Mike, what figure are you using for inflation?
Well, it's the budget that I project in the 5-year forecast. No single line item is affected by the change in CPI or inflation. We look at health insurance costs go up greater than inflation. Our employee costs or salaries go up based on the step increases.
What we give them.
Supplies to the buildings don't go up at all. So overall, our budget, we anticipate it going up less than inflation. It's around 2%. Right. And inflation's been a little higher than that. But a 2% increase in the expense means we need to cut 2% because our revenue's not going to go up 2%.
Right. Gotcha.
So how do we, where expenditures per pupil shows how much we spend overall on an average for every student. Now, does every student get $8,700 worth of expenses on them? No. Special ed students are much higher, typical students are much lower, but the average is $8,717. I know that number's 2 years old. They put out numbers in 2014 and I can't figure out what number it should be. They completely changed the report and I can't find where that number would be in 2014. When I do, I'll update the slide. So the next few slides are all based on 2013. So how do we compare to the other Lake County schools? We are third lowest when it comes to per pupil expenditure. You can see Perry is the highest at about $13,000 average per student, and Riverside is the lowest at $8,400. I was thinking about that this morning, and Riverside is lower than us. They don't have any high school busing. They're at state minimums, and they're at full pay to participate. We are not, so honestly, we're probably providing a better education, overall education, at a slight increase than the two districts that are below us.
Not just education, but services. Because the buses.
Correct.
This is services. Gotcha. Yep.
We have, I keep track of two different types of combined millage. The first is the operating levies. How do we compare to the other Lake County schools as far as the millage tax to our taxpayers for the operation of the schools. We're second lowest. Only Perry is below us, and that might have something to do with the big power plant in their district. And then you look at all of our other levies and combine it with the operational levy, and we're third lowest. The reason we're a little higher than Riverside is we have the debt levy for our new buildings. But those are relatively close. The community, when you ask them where does your tax dollars go, most of them will answer, well, schools get most of it. Well, this shows the breakdown of where your tax dollars actually go. If you live in the village, a little less than 52% comes to the schools, 9.6 goes to the village, 8.9 goes to the fire district. If you're in the township, a lesser percentage, same dollar amount, but a lesser percentage comes to the schools, a larger percentage goes to the township. That's because the village has the ability and does have an income tax to fund some of their operations. The township does not have a tax, so they need real estate tax money to fund their operations.
Presently, that's what, 2% village income tax? 1%?
Yeah. Okay, well, the last few months we've been dealing with something new for this board. It's called tax increment financing. What is it? It's an economic development tool to finance public infrastructure improvements. Sewers down Route 20, sewers down Route 528. How does it work? A municipality, in this case the ones that we've looked at is Madison Township, creates an incentive district and redirects a portion of the owner's taxes to pay for the improvements. What are the terms? Well, the terms that they can use are 10 years and 75%, meaning the taxing authorities within that district could lose up to 75% of the taxes to which they're entitled for up to a 10-year period. Right now, the ones that are in place are 10 years and 50%. How does it affect the schools? We lose 50% of the taxes that we would be entitled to if that property was brought on the tax rolls at its full value. So I'm going to give you an example, and this is actually one of the ones the board was presented with 2 weeks ago. New property built, the appraised value is $3.8 million. The taxable value, which is 35% of that, is $1.3 million. That taxpayer would pay in taxes almost $104,000. The taxpayer is still going to make payments of $103,000. Half of that money is going to go into a special fund to pay for the improvements. The other half is going to be split up based on the percentages you saw in the previous slides. So if there was no TIF, or tax increment financing district, for this one property, the district would get $50,276 out of the $103. After the TIF, we're only going to get $25,000. Now the argument can be made that we should be happy with the 25. I'd be happier with the 50. You know, we have very little opportunities to increase revenue in this district. Here's an opportunity that is being cut.
One of the things when we have levies up, one of the things that you hear from taxpayers is, why don't we have more business in here so it will help offset how much taxes we have? Well, that's true, it would, except that when they give, the township in this case, gives away half of it. Yes, money came in, but not as much to the schools as the taxpayers would hope that we got.
Yeah, so just for clarification, we should be entitled to the $50,276 and would get that had the township not exercise their right for this TIF. And as a result of that, $25,000 comes to us, and basically $25,000 goes to the township. Is that correct?
Yes, the 25 that doesn't go to us goes into a fund to pay for the public improvements.
Yeah.
The township can't use it for operations. It gets redirected by the county auditor into that fund to pay for the public improvements. So on an annual basis, we're going to lose $25,000. The township will lose $7,800, and the fire district will lose $4,600. We obviously lose the most because we are the greatest benefactor of the taxes that are collected on any given property within our district. But the cumulative loss over the 10-year period is a little over $250,000.
And that's for that one property?
That is for the one property.
And how many TIFs do we have on the books right now?
3. We have, there is a TIF for the dialysis center, there is a TIF for the winery that was built on 528, and they have TIF'd a vacant parcel. I don't remember whether it's on 528 or Route 20.
Do you know, and if you don't, I understand, do you know what the total revenue loss for the 10 years is going to be for us for these 3 parcels?
I believe, well, it's $250,000 for the winery. I believe the other one, the dialysis center, was around $6,000, so that would be $60,000. And the vacant land, since there's been no improvements, we're not losing anything, but there's no potential gain yet until they put something on that property.
Like, who is watching in the 10 years to show that they do make the improvements on the property? Anybody?
I don't know whether they have to go through the Ohio Department of Development or whatever that agency is called, because they do have things that they have to do in order to be able to do the TIF and, you know, the improvements. I don't know what happens is that at the end of 10 years they don't do the improvements.
Right.
I don't have an answer to that. The TIFs that I've been involved in, we're spending the money as quick as it came in. You know, they would do a development with the money they received the prior year, and then, you know, wait for the next one to come in.
I'm not sure that we're privy to but like the dialysis, wasn't it sewers and everything, and water's all put in advance? So this is actually just repaying that particular fund, possibly, or?
I don't think so.
I don't think there's a fund.
I don't think there is sewers yet to. It might be another tip. One of the to answer your question first, I don't think there's sewers to the dialysis center yet. There may be one for the auto parts store that's outside the old Kmart.
Yeah.
Because sewers were not run.
They were
down
in the
20.
back.
They were run down the back.
Right.
And I don't recall offhand how much revenue we've given up on there. I know there are not sewers yet to the winery, but the winery's open. Now, I'm going to put my other hat on. If sewers generates more commercial and industrial development, in the long run, we will probably be better off than if the TIF never occurred.
Right.
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. And that's the idea. They're hoping for future growth in our community.
There are no limits on the amount of tips that they can?
There is, and I've got a handout. It has to do with they can't tip any more than, I believe, 25% of your tax base. And for us, that's close to $400 million. So they can tip $100 million. But keep in mind, every time 3.8 gets added in, there's more that they can tip because of that.
I guess we're lucky they're not taking the 75% they could be taking.
That's correct. So they are helping the taxing authorities by not taking all 75.
If you want, if we could switch gears for a moment, could you talk briefly about the special needs costs, specifically the state's lack of reimbursing us for the special needs costs and how it affects our budget? Because I know that's a pretty big piece of what we're struggling with.
Sure. As I showed you the per pupil expenditure, I'm going to go back to my seat. The per pupil expenditure, the number was $8,700. That's well below what we spend on special education students. We have a few that, due to the nature of their disability, we could spend over $100,000 on. And the state has said anything over $27,000 and change will participate in that cost. And their participation, their reimbursement to us should be 75 cents for every dollar we spend over that $27,000. For us last year, that part that they should have reimbursed us for kids that we spent over $27,000 was $1.1 million. So, according to them, we should have gotten a check for $1.1 million, which means we already spent $27,000 on every one of those kids. And there's 40 or 60 or 80 kids, I don't remember offhand. But because they underfund the line item, which is scary because it's the highest last year as it's ever been, $150 million statewide, our reimbursement was in the $400,000 range, for around $500,000. So not only do we pay the first $27,000, we are now paying more over $27,000 than the state promised us. When you look at my forecast, there's a line item that includes catastrophic cost reimbursement, which is what I'm talking about, and it goes down. I don't anticipate our special education costs going down. I don't anticipate the number of kids we file on going down. What I anticipate is, since they dropped the budget from $150 million down to $40 million, that the reimbursement's going to go down. So we'll go from $500,000 down to $200,000. So work just as hard tracking all those costs for much less, for about 20% of what they should be paying us. Not 20% of what we spend, 20% of what they owe us.
Who's lobbying for us, or who contacts the state legislature, the governor? Who can do it? Who should be doing it? And are we doing it? You know, are we twisting arms down there? The state's supposed to be turning around as far as their total revenues. The rainy day fund has been brought back up. Now they're anticipating more monies to work with. That should be owed to us. That should be brought up to make us whole. But there's lots of other people out there with their hands out. You know, roads need to be, improved more. So who's? You have a question?
Yep. I will tell you, a few years ago, we had legislators in for small group discussions. Ron Young was in, Rogers was in, and I brought it up with both of them. It really didn't go anywhere. It's such a small piece of the budget that I'm not sure how many people actually paid attention to that part. When it was finally approved, I emailed OSBA and said, am I reading this correct? Catastrophic cost reimbursement went from a budget line item of 150 down to 40. They didn't know offhand. So unfortunately, that's one of those line items that people aren't looking at. So they can cut it and nobody says a lot. To answer the question of who should be calling them, they should be calling them about everything that's happened to the schools in the last 5, 6, 7 years. The cutting of a revenue stream personal property, replacing it with another tax on businesses, but then cutting out the revenue to the schools, but keeping the CAT tax, the commercial activity tax. Things like the acceleration of a phase out. this district has been able to plan for the cuts that have been coming. We planned for no increase in state revenue for 5 years. This is what we planned. Now, if they come along and say, we're going to cut you 10%, we'll adjust. But if they come along and actually cut 20%, we have a problem. So the issue is they will say one thing, allow districts to start to plan for it, and then cut. We are lucky, I guess, that our reimbursement's already been cut. There are districts right now that are struggling with the fact that they did it to them, and those districts get millions of dollars in reimbursement. We've already made our adjustment. People like Solon and Independence are scrambling, trying to figure out how to fill a $3 million hole in their budget. OSBA has lobbyists, and they've done what they can. Frankly, the governor says he's increased funding to schools, not to the Madison schools, and that's all I care about, that's all we care about. Charter schools have gotten more funding than we have, with horrible results. I would say if our results were like theirs, they cut our funding.
No, they wouldn't. Cleveland doesn't get cut, and theirs is horrible. Youngstown's horrible. They don't get cut.
But they've been taken over.
They're still public schools.
Huh?
They are totally, they don't have any local control there.
Right, but they're still not getting cut. And that's...
It's going to take more than just OSBA. It's going to take more than just treasurers. It's going to take the community saying, enough is enough. We're supposed to not have this reliance on the local taxpayers. We do less than 50%, but our reliance is based on levies that were passed in 1989 and 1990. So again, 25, 26-year-old revenue stream, cuts, and then, thank God, we flattened out with the state, gives us a flat line of revenue, but better than decreasing. But it's these little items that we've been able to help ourselves with through a lot of hard work that are now going away too.
One of the things that it's very difficult for taxpayers, and I'm a taxpayer as well here, to understand that the Constitution, said that we're supposed to fund it properly and that type of thing. That Supreme Court says we're over-reliant on local taxes. However, where's it going to come from? And they quote, it's from the state. These are not accurate numbers here. I'm just using it as an example. For every dollar we send to Washington, D.C., we get probably 70 cents back. For every dollar we send down to Columbus, we probably get 80 cents back. But if we raised our taxes locally with our own levies, we get 100% of our money back. So it's therefore way better to have local taxes raised for our own fire, our own police, and our own schools, instead of saying, state, you need to bail us out. Because for every dollar we send down to Columbus, we're getting 80 cents back. It doesn't make any sense. But that's the way this country's going right now. Well, we want the feds to bail us out. We want the state to bail us out. Well, guess what? It's just, we're sending money to other places, and yeah, we're bailing ourselves. No, they're not bailing us out. They're just rechanneling the money someplace else where they think it's a good idea. To me, it's ridiculous. I mean, we should be, Madison needs to say, Madison needs to support their schools, the fire, the police, that type of thing, and whenever we have that opportunity. But the problem is, of course, we all know this, the only place you and I get to say no to additional taxes is at our local levels. So therefore, that's where we send the message, and that's who gets hurt: the libraries, in the schools, or and that type of thing. So people have to start looking at the bigger picture instead of just saying voting with their own personal pocketbooks. And that's what we vote for many times, our own personal pocketbooks.
Anybody else have any questions?
I'd just like to add that, when Mike put the numbers in, when we get complaints about students being in 2.5 study halls at the middle school, or not having enough course offerings, those are where those cuts came from. I mean, we didn't have to lay off a lot of teachers to do it over the course of the last 6 years, but we looked at where we could cut, and they impact kids. And so that's the piece that, from the story we're trying to get out to groups and let them know that.
And it's going to start impacting our test scores as well. I mean, we don't want it, but at some point it's going to. I mean, we just start thinning things out too much.
Well, we won't know that for a while.
Oh, yes.
That's in my report tonight, talking about test scores a little later.
Let's understand the test score first.
Yes.
And then they'll change.
All right. How about we go ahead and move on? Reports and recommendations of the
I
treasurer.
just got 2 more things really quick.
Okay.
One is some information on tax increment financing. And the other, in October, I will be asking for approval of the 5-year forecast. Basically, you've seen the numbers.
Can you send us the slides so that we can have those for our own prayers?
On the 5-year forecast, we actually have a positive balance for the next 2 years, which is probably the first time since I took over in 2011 we can say that. But it's close that second year. It won't take much on a $25 million budget to wipe that out. But then once again, as my slide showed, we are looking at deficits the final 3 years. So we will, again, be considering how to balance that budget. But in October, I need approval of the 5-year forecast. It has to be submitted to the state by the end of October. If you have any questions on the numbers, let me know. I haven't done the assumptions yet that are behind the numbers. When I finish those, I will email them. Okay. Okay, on to the items that are in the agenda. The first is to look for approval of the financial reports for all funds, fund-to-fund transfer report, and the check payment register for August 2015.
Need a motion?
I'll second.
Mr. Vaccarella?
Kelly Tromba?
Yes.
Larry Armstrong?
Yes.
Jacqueline Asbill?
Yes.
Jay Fabian?
Yes.
Vote is 4-0. The next is to approve the permanent appropriations for fiscal year 2016. The biggest number is the general fund, which is our operational fund at $25,178,807, and all funds together are $34,435,182.21.
Need a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
Mr. Vaccarella?
Larry Armstrong?
Yes.
Jacqueline Asbill?
Yes.
Jay Fabian?
Yes.
Kelly Tromba?
Yes.
Vote is 4-0. The next lengthy resolution, which I will not read all of it,
I appreciate that.
has to do with refinancing, or as we call refunding, the House Bill 264 notes that were originally issued in 2011 to pay for energy improvements in the district. We are once again participating in the Ohio OMAP project. It's guaranteed, or it's backed by the Ohio Treasurer of State, which, when we have a bond rating, frankly, as crappy as ours because of our revenue and expense problems, we have a horrible bond rating that drives up our interest cost. Participating in this program allows us to get a better rating, thereby saving dollars. Last year we participated in the program and the overall savings was about $5,000 on an interest cost, net interest of $18,000.
Need a motion?
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Jacqueline Asbill?
Yes.
Jay Fabian?
Yes.
Kelly Tromba?
Yes.
Larry Armstrong?
Yes.
Vote is 4-0. And finally, to accept a generous donation of school supplies from Crossroads Community Church.
So moved.
I'll second.
Mr. Vaccarella?
Jay Fabian?
Yes.
Kelly Tromba?
Yes.
Larry Armstrong?
Yes.
Jacqueline Askel?
Yes.
Vote is 4-0.
Reports of the administrative team.
Well, first, thank you to Mr. Vanderella for putting together the presentation for tonight, updating it with the most recent numbers. I really, the more we tell that story, and get it out to people, they understand a little bit about where we're at, and hopefully where we want to go. I will have, hopefully by Friday, in the newsletter, some options, more detailed options for strategic plan. When I emailed that to you on Friday, I didn't realize that the woman that Jan told me to talk to was out of town today, Monday and today. So hopefully I will have some more concrete costs associated with strategic planning, and we can, at our October meeting, talk a little bit about which way we want to proceed. We can do a quicker version, we can do a little bit more drawn out version, depending upon what our pleasure is as a group. So I will have that information for you to think about. I went to United Way breakfast this morning for the education kickoff. I'm the education co-chair with the principal of Willoughby South. Madison was very well represented. We had every building there with their advisors, and we last year for United Way raised over $5,000. That was an increase of 4 times the amount the year before. 400% is what they said this morning. And it's just, I think, the awareness that we've created that the money raised in Lake County stays in Lake County, and we have a lot of students that benefit. And I'll start putting some of those, I put them in my update to staff, but I'll put it in the newsletter this week, some of the facts that United Way has shared with me, how people in Madison have benefited from it.